If you're thinking of buying a home in 2024, or you're already in the process but offer after offer keeps getting rejected, then today's episode is going to be for you. So on today's episode, I'm going to go over the 5 things that you should be doing on every single offer to make sure you have the best chance of getting your offer accepted and getting into your dream home. So let's go ahead and get into it. So as we enter 2024, the housing market forecasts for Orange County, which, side note, if you haven't checked mine out yet, you can check it out right up here if you're watching it on YouTube, but basically it's showing that supply is expected to remain low and interest rates are expected to slowly decline for the remainder of the year, which means that demand should start to increase, which ultimately for buyers means that you'll be dealing with more competition on a lot of the homes that you're trying to purchase right now. So how do you go about competing with all these other buyers while at the same time placing the best offer you can while keeping yourself protected? Well, the first thing you need to know is what sellers are actually looking for. So obviously sellers are going to be looking to make a profit on the sale. So they're looking for a high price on the home. However, that's not the only thing they're looking for. And today we're going to concentrate on that second part. And the second part is this escrow going to close? Is it going to be smooth? How much do I have to worry about this buyer backing out of escrow? So that has to do with the confidence that the seller has in the buyer to be able to close on that home on time. So why is this important? Well, a lot of times sellers are not only selling their home, but they're trying to purchase another one. So they're getting into escrow on their own home while in escrow with you. So if you can't close, then they can't close on their home. So even though, yes, the purchase price is going to be an important factor, that confidence that the seller has in the buyer closing escrow on time is also a huge consideration. And if you can give them that confidence, you might be able to outcompete other offers that are higher prices. So let's go over the 5 different ways that you can do that now. Okay, so number 1, if you're like most home buyers who need a loan to be able to purchase the property, did you know that the type of approval you get could dramatically impact if the seller is going to accept your loan? Let's go ahead and go over exactly what I'm talking about. So if you pull up the California Residential Purchase Agreement, which is what you're filling out every time you place an offer on a home, you'll actually see that there's 3 different sections for the type of loan you get approved for. So 1, there's a pre-qualification, then a pre-approval, then a fully underwritten pre-approval. So what is the difference between all of these? So pre-qualification, that is something that you really don't see that often anymore, and it's really a non-starter for any seller right now, but it's basically you're going to an online portal, you're telling them how much you make, how much debt you have, and they're giving you a general idea of how much you might be able to afford if you got it approved for a loan. So this doesn't require a lot of paperwork, and it's not very precise, so it's not something that most sellers are going to want to even look at because it's just too unknown. You don't really know if you're going to actually be approved for a loan with that basic documentation. So if you have one of those pre-qualification letters and not pre-approval letters where you're just not sending in a lot of documentation to your lender, know that you're going to have a very difficult time getting an offer accepted. So let's go on to the other 2, which are what you typically see for most buyers right now. And let's start with pre-approval. So pre-approval is when you're actually sending the documentation to the lender and they're looking at things like paycheck stubs and going through your bank account, and they're running the numbers and giving you a clearer picture of what type of home you can afford based off your current income as well as your debts. So this type of pre-approval is a lot more common, and it's something that a lot of buyers have when they first go out shopping for homes. But did you know there's an extra step above that called the fully underwritten pre-approval, which in a lot of cases can give you an edge up on your competition because not a lot of home buyers are doing it right now. Now, what this fully underwritten pre-approval does is it goes one step further. So you're giving all the documentation to the lender, but on the lending side of things, the lender is taking all that documentation and they're basically running it through their underwriting department. And this is the department that's dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's, and basically giving you almost a guarantee at this point that based off your documentation, yes, you qualify for a loan. So things that might come up on here that you're not going to see in a pre-approval is, let's say you had a gift of $20,000 come into your bank account at some point. During a pre-approval process, they're not usually asking for documentation around that. They're just getting a verbal explanation of what that is. But when you go through the underwriting department, they're going to ask for documentation on where that money came from, why it came there, and they're basically going through and getting every document they need to get you fully approved. So that way when you go and place an offer on a home, so that you and the seller can know with almost absolute certainty that when you place an offer on a home and you have that fully underwritten pre-approval, that you're going to be able to purchase that house. Now, the other reason this fully underwritten pre-approval comes in handy is if a seller needs to do a quick close, let's say they're moving and they need to sell the house quickly, so they're looking for an offer that can close maybe in 14, 15, 16 days versus the typical 25 to 30 days. If you don't have all of that paperwork out of the way before you place the offer, it's going to be hard for your lender to guarantee they're going to be able to close the loan that quickly. So by getting all of the paperwork done up front before you even place offers, it not only is going to allow you to do a shorter escrow and be more flexible if the seller needs a quicker escrow, but give you that guarantee that if you go into escrow with that price, that you're going to be able to close on it. So if you don't have a lender that can do a fully underwritten pre-approval, it might be a good idea to look at other options out there and find one that can. That way you're going to be able to be as competitive as possible, and it's just more security for yourself and for the seller, so everybody wins. Okay, so number 2, you need to make sure that your real estate agent is calling the seller's agent to figure out exactly what the seller is looking for in their offer. You'd be amazed by how many people do not call the agent, just send in an offer with no explanation, and they might not be realizing it, but that agent is basically sabotaging you. So let me explain. So let's say that you did get that fully underwritten pre-approval and you can close quickly on a house, and to be competitive, you wanted to do a 14-day escrow. So you put that in the offer and send it to the agent. Now, what happens if that seller actually needed a longer escrow? They're looking for maybe a 45-day escrow because they need to find a new home for themselves, and they'd appreciate the extra time to be able to find that home and close on that home. If you're putting that offer in 14 days, that's not giving you an advantage. It's actually a disadvantage at that point. So that's why it's so important to call the agent, figure out what the motivation of the seller is, how quickly they're looking to move, what's important to them besides the price when they're looking at offers. So that way you can write a clean offer up front, make it as appealing as possible to give yourself the best shot of getting an offer accepted. Now, yes, the seller can always come back and say, I actually want a longer escrow, and you can go back and forth and figure it out that way. However, you're not making a very good first impression to either the seller or the selling agent by doing this, and it leaves them a little bit skeptical about your communication skills and if you're going to be able to get through escrow without any issues and close on the back end of it. So by having your agent reach out to the seller's agent, figuring out exactly what they're looking for in that offer before you place it, it's just going to make your offer stand out against all the other buyers whose agents didn't do that, and believe me, there are plenty of them. So number 3 is safely reducing your contingency period. So if you're not familiar with contingencies, what they are is basically protections put in place in the contract to give you an out if something was wrong with the house and you no longer wanted to buy it. So if you found something with the inspection you didn't like, you can back out of escrow, get your deposit back. If the appraisal didn't come back in value, if you couldn't get the loan approved, you could back out of escrow, get your deposit back within these time frames provided. Now, typically, the way the contract is written, you have 17 days to do all these things. So get the appraisal, get an inspection done, make sure the loan gets approved. However, the problem with that on the seller side of things is that gives you 17 days to back out of the contract. So if you're able to reduce those contingencies even at all, it just basically locks you in to purchase the home a little bit quicker, giving the seller a little bit more confidence that you're going to be able to close escrow. So let's go over 2 quick examples of how this might work in a real life situation. So let's say you're trying to purchase a house, and again, the contract states for the inspection contingency, you have 17 days to do your inspection. However, if you're proactive about it and you call the inspector before you place the offer, and you're able to have them set an appointment for you maybe 2 or 3 days after you place that offer, this would allow time for you to get your offer accepted, and then only a day or 2 after it's accepted, you're having that general inspection done. Typically, once you have that inspection done, you're going to know pretty quickly if you need any additional inspections, like in a plumber or an electrician, because typically a general inspector is a general inspector. They're not going to be licensed in a bunch of different categories, so they might recommend that you need a secondary inspection done based on what they find in the house. So typically, the general inspector goes out there, let's say 2 days after escrow opens, he does the inspection, he finds some plumbing issues, you get a plumber out there, maybe 2 days later, they give you a quote on how much it would be to fix. You go back and forth with the seller for another 2 or 3 days, figuring out what they're going to fix, what they're going to give credit for, and you come to agreement on day 7. By being proactive and scheduling that inspection for right after escrow opens, you're typically not going to need the full 17 days to do all those inspections, and you might comfortably be able to put it down to 14 days, 12 days, or even less depending on the situation. And again, this will give you a better shot of getting your offer accepted, because the shorter the contingencies are, the more secure your your offer is going to look in the seller's eyes. Now, another one, again, has to do with the lender, and again, has to do with that fully underwritten pre-approval. If they have all the documentation they need and they're just basically waiting for an appraisal of the property at this point, the lender probably doesn't need a full 17 days to get your loan approved. They just need the appraisal to come back, and they put it through the underwriting department one more time, and they can get everything taken care of very quickly. So typically, you might be able to reduce that contingency as well to 14, 12, 10, or even 7 days and still be protected because they're already doing all the work up front before you go into escrow. So these are just a few situations, and every house and every situation will be a little bit different, but these are the type of things that can get your offer put above someone else's, while again keeping you safe at the same time. So number 4 is when you place an offer, make sure you have the lender call the selling agent to go over all the financial stuff that the selling agent might need to know before actually going over the offer with the seller. This is hugely important, and it's something that probably only 15 to 20% of lenders actually do, but it makes a huge difference to the selling agent when they're able to get the lender on the line, ask them any questions they have the lender reassure them that they're fully qualified, that they have that fully underwritten pre-approval, and they're just waiting for the appraisal at that point, and gives them more confidence when they go to present the offer to the seller that the loan is solid and they don't have to worry about the financing side of it. So make sure when you talk to your lender, ask them if they're able to call the selling agent every time you place an offer to have that conversation. And it could be hugely helpful. And again, place your offer above someone else's just because it makes the seller feel more secure. And the 5th and final thing that buyers need to be doing to give themselves the best shot at getting their offer accepted is when you're interviewing your real estate agent to figure out who you're going to use, you need to ask specific questions about the process they use to submit offers. So like we already talked about, they should be calling the selling agent every single time to make sure that you're understanding what the seller is looking for. But on top of that, and this might sound silly, but I've literally had agents reach out to me telling me this is why my buyer's offer got accepted. They need to be able to have good communication skills and be able to follow directions. So the 2 things that I want to point out here is when an agent is submitting an offer on behalf of a buyer, they should be writing an extensive email going over all the information about the offer, summarizing it, putting in any information the seller or the selling agent might need to know, the lender's contact information, anything that's going to help make the case on why you're the best offer possible. This is just one extra opportunity for you to communicate with the seller and the selling agent as to why your offer should be accepted over anybody else's. Now, when it comes to following instructions, and I know this sounds crazy, but when an agent puts the house in the MLS, there's typically an agent remark section, and that basically gives the agent all the instructions on how the offer should be submitted. So sometimes, for example, the seller wants all of the documents compiled into one PDF to make it easier to read, or maybe the selling agent wants everything sent to a separate email address so it doesn't get lost in their inbox. You'd be amazed by how many agents don't take the time to read those instructions and follow them, which is obviously not a good first impression on the competency of the agent you're using as well as you as a buyer, and it doesn't leave a good taste in the seller's mouth. And again, it might seem like a small thing, but these type of things add up, and it could be the reason why your offer doesn't get accepted or does get accepted. And unfortunately, it just has to do with how competent your agent is and probably has nothing to do with you as the buyer, but you'll get punished if you don't have an agent that's good with communication as well as following instructions. So you can see again with these 5 things, it has nothing to do with the actual price of the offer, but everything to do with how competent your lender as well as your real estate agent is. So when you're interviewing your lender, when you're interviewing your real estate agent, you need to make sure you're asking the right questions to make sure you find one that's going to give you the best chance of getting your offer accepted and again, keeping you protected at the same time. Now, obviously, these aren't all the tactics to help get your offer accepted, but this is a starting point and a bare minimum that you should be doing every time you place an offer. Now, if you're interested to learn more about different tactics you could be using to help get your offer accepted, feel free to set up a discovery call with me anytime. It takes about 30 minutes, and I can go over your individualized situation and give you the best game plan possible to make sure you're giving yourself the best chance of getting your offer accepted and getting into that dream home. So if you want to do that, feel free to check out the description below or the link in my bio, depending on where you're watching this. You can check out my calendar, find a time that works for you, and we can book a 30-minute call and go over all that information and any other questions you might have about buying a home in the housing market. So until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you on the next show. Bye, everybody.